And just to begin, in my own spiritual reflection, meditation, and prayer for the season of Lent, I've been circling back to this idea, something that I read in a book at some point, but last Wednesday when we had Ash Wednesday, when I was praying before our service and thinking, I couldn't help but just think about all the things that needed to be done. And there was just a line from somewhere, I should look it up, that came into my spirit, and it said, "It's hard to fill a cup that's already full." And I feel like during Lent, it's a perfect time to sort of empty ourselves of our needs, of our desires, empty ourselves at least for a few moments together of the things we have planned, the things we need to get done, all the things that are on the calendar, and just to be empty, at least for a time, to be an empty vessel which God can fill with faith and trust and with hope and with love, all those things that God is so fond of filling us with when we give God the opportunity to do that. And so part of our spiritual practice together is going to be just empty vessels that are eager to be filled with whatever God has to fill us with this night and in the weeks to come. That being said, it also helped to form this art and prayer thing, whatever this is. It's not a worship service. It's not a Bible study. It's not really a study of any kind. Rather, it tries to fulfill this model. It's scaffolding upon which we can build and through which we can be filled in conversation and prayer. So as we take a few moments away from the world and the culture that we live in, the social media culture, the 10,000 ads a day culture, we come in here and just enjoy some time to speak and to listen, yes, to ask questions anytime, to offer your insights anytime. You're welcome to do that. But we'll also be doing things like spending a few minutes at a time in silence. Ooh, what do we do with silence? Well, in this case, we'll have something at least to look at, to gaze upon. And so we're welcome in this time and space to gaze, to dwell, to simply be, to be what God has created you to be in the silence. Remember, Jesus teaches, when you pray, don't pray out in front of a bunch of people. Go into a secret room, and God who sees in secret will hear you. And so we enter into that space together here. But that being said, next slide, please. As a pastor, my spiritual gift that is central to who I am is teaching. So I really couldn't help to at least pick out some things to talk about as we gaze upon an image and let it guide our prayer. I also felt compelled to tell you some things about that image, where it came from, who created it, why they may have created it. And so that's going to be part of our study too. But the purpose of being here is to grow together in our faith, not to grow our faith, but to grow into our faith, the faith that is the work of the Holy Spirit. To engage in a prayerful and spiritual experience with art, to encounter unique testaments. And I do think that art, each piece of art, specifically religious art, is a testament, much like we find in the Gospels, much like we find in the Bible. It is a story. It is an invitation for you to go deep into whatever might be there and to encounter God there. And so that's part of what we're doing here, to gain some kind of new dimension or perspective through whatever this artist may have wanted us to feel as we're gazing upon them. We will learn some things about history and art. And I couldn't fight my urge to just share some information. That's what I seem to like to do best. But mostly we're going to try to just sort of be and to look at beautiful and interesting art. The caveat there is that you'll have to trust my opinion. Whatever is good art or beautiful is absolutely subjective. And so you'll have to trust that I've chosen things that I think will lead us down spiritual pathways. Even if it's not the most beautiful art in the world, I've chosen 5 different pieces of art because I think that they can inspire us in some way, fill us as empty vessels in some way with God's presence again. And what I happen to like, maybe it's because I never grew out of it, and this is what I studied as a younger person, but typically Renaissance, Mannerist, and Baroque art of Europe. So that'll be generally, and that may shift a little bit, but that's generally what we're going to be looking at. I seem to be in love with art that is beauty for beauty's sake. The only exception to that would probably be tonight, which is a little bit different than that. And so you'll see what I mean. There on the screen right now, smaller than maybe we'd like, is Tintoretto, a great Renaissance artist who painted this image of Christ washing the disciples' feet in 1549. And so that just gives you a sense of the kind of things we may be looking at. Next slide, please. Tonight we're going to be taking a look, dwelling with and gazing upon a work by Pieter Bruegel. You can correct my pronunciation. Pieter Bruegel. This is Pieter Bruegel the Elder. For those of you who are experts, there are two, the elder and the younger. This one is the elder, and he was born in 1525. And if you are studied in, let's say, Protestant Reformation type history, that's a very interesting time to be born, because that means that about 8 years after Luther nailed his 95 Theses up onto the church door in Wittenberg and essentially began the Protestant Reformation, Pieter Bruegel was born into a very embroiled context between the Catholic world and the brand new and still emerging in many ways Protestant world. I think maps like the one that are on the right there are important for us specifically, not just historically, but because they sort of shape who we are too. They certainly shape who our church is, but so many of us have ancestors that came from, for example, borders between the Western Netherlands and Eastern France, where the Catholics and Protestants fought about 100 years worth of wars and caused a lot of people to say, oh, they discovered a new continent over there. Why don't we go check that out? And decided to make the voyage. And many of those people are our ancestors. But for Pieter Bruegel, we can see through his art that he lived on the cusp of an emerging world. In his case, the older Catholic way and this new Protestant way of seeing things deeply inspired his art. Pieter Bruegel, and no comments about his hat, please, or his hairstyle, but there he is. And he had a very new and different way of painting. He was a Mannerist painter, and Mannerist painting is often seen as kind of an answer to the Renaissance painting and sculpture and art world of places like Spain and Italy, heavily Catholic places. And as the Renaissance kind of tapered off, this new Mannerist way kind of began. Next slide, please. And so, for example, you can see there the Cowper Madonna by Raphael, painted in 1505 in Italy, and then something very different, the Madonna of the Long Neck, painted in 1540, not meant to be simply beautiful, but meant to make you think. Mannerist painters seem to want you to stand there and stare and to engage with their art for a different reason than simply because it's beautiful. It gives you things to think about. Look at the proportions of Christ on the right. It's strange and odd. What could that possibly mean? How does that inspire us in some way? Madonna, not like a virgin, but the actual Virgin Madonna there, she's probably like 11 feet tall in this painting. What could that possibly mean? What do the robes mean and things like that? So Mannerist painting tries to get you to engage with it for different reasons. I'd like for you to remember the image that's on the left there, Raphael's Cowper Madonna, because when you compare it with the painting from Pieter Bruegel, which was painted in 1559, just look at how far and how different art had become in such a short amount of time. Bruegel, by the way, he lived a different life. Some would say that Renaissance in Italy was the perfect place and time for amazing art. People who wanted some favor in heaven, paying enormous amounts of money to artists to paint something, and maybe they would paint those who paid for it off in the corner, and therefore guaranteeing their place in heaven. Artists in Renaissance Italy were superstars. They were the celebrities of the day and time, whereas Mannerist painters aren't so much. And Bruegel, for example, was known most for painting peasants, something extremely uncommon, even for his time. He was known to dress up as a peasant in disguise and attend social functions of the lower classes like weddings or dances or feasts to gain authentic material for his paintings. He wanted very desperately to observe real life and to paint real life as it was experienced by a majority of the people. And again, that's a very new idea for him. Got a few other things here, but I think that probably says enough, unless we want to point out that along with the Protestant Reformation, or maybe as part of the wave of the Protestant Reformation, the idea of humanism was huge. It's not just the king, it's not just the princes, it's not just the saints, but everyone that matters, and you that matters, and your connection with God that matters. And so that inspires somebody like Pieter Bruegel to paint something that'll show the life of common and everyday folks too. They matter too, after all. Next slide, please. And tonight we're going to be taking a very close look at this painting. This is the full painting, as you see it on the screen up there, including all the buildings in back. When we really focus in, we're going to chop off that top part and really zone in or zoom in on some things. But this is a painting called The Combat Between Carnival and Lent. It was painted by Pieter Bruegel in 1559. I think he was only 34 years old when he painted. Not bad. And it's important to know, just in spiritual context, that before the Lenten season began, various parts of the Christian world would indulge in a series of festival days known as Carnival. It came from the Latin word carnivalarium, which means getting rid of meat. Mardi Gras, for example, which is just Fat Tuesday in French, but Mardi Gras, for example, is a culmination of these festivities. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We'll come back to this, promise. It's a culmination of these festivities traditionally in which people prepare for the 40 days of the fast of Lent by consuming meat and drink, which are forbidden during the Lenten fast. Things like revelry and masquerades and debauchery in general came to accompany the festivities. And in some ways, they carried on even older traditions of pagan observances of the springtime. And so they coupled together very well. And for centuries upon centuries, the tradition grew, even in the ancient world, until the revelry grew out of hand. And it seems to have lost some of its significance. Now we can take a look at the picture that's in front of you there and say, how much does that have to do with the 40 days fast of Lent? Probably not that much, honestly. And as we live out our daily lives in the 21st century, how much does our celebration of something like Mardi Gras actually mean to prepare us for the fast of Lent? Probably not that much. But certainly in the 1500s, in the 16th century, it had grown out of control, and the church was noticing that it was sort of losing its grip, and that folks really just wanted to continue the party and not enter into the 40 days fast of Lent. And so it became really popular for some Christians, especially Lutheran pastors or traveling Jesuit priests, to initiate something called the 40 hours devotion. And that took place during the last 40 hours of Carnival to serve in part as an expiation or a penitence. We're so sorry about what we've done for the many sins committed during the Carnival. And that is the setting for Pieter Bruegel the Elder's The Fight Between Carnival, or The Combat Between Carnival and Lent. Next slide. It's Bruegel's observation of the contrast between the vices of the Carnival and the virtues of Lenten devotion. Just as info, it's about 35 inches tall, about 45 inches wide. So think roughly 3 feet by 4 feet. And it's painted on an oil canvas, crowded by characters. And it's essentially divided into 2 parts. And we're going to certainly dive deeper into that. But this is meant to take place during the 40 hours devotion, the very end of the Carnival and the beginning of Lent. People should, at this point, already be repenting of sins committed during the Carnival and turning their attention toward Lent. And so this painting shows the contrast in culture between doing so or just keeping the party going. It has biblical significance. As we start to gaze upon the image, we remember that the right hand of God is thought to be holy. My name, for example, Benjamin, means son of the right hand. And so Benjamin was a favored one. The favored are at the right. Remember Matthew 28, when Jesus says, those sheep who have cared for their neighbors in need come to my right hand. And the goats, I don't know what's wrong with goats, but the goats who have not cared for those in need will sit at my left hand. And so the right is blessed and the left is somehow in some way cursed. And as we start to gaze upon this image, we'll notice that there are differences between what's happening on the right and what's happening on the left. There's a lot going on here. So what we're going to do is take about 3.5 minutes to simply gaze upon the image, not just with your eyes, but also with your spirit. Notice the characters, the clusters. What are they doing? Does anything stand out to you? Okay. What do you see?
See the person dressed in white. I don't know if he's praying or doing something else, but that's kind of what it looks like.
A person dressed in white? Where are you looking?
That's not, yeah.
Center right? A little down a little bit and to the right? Yes. With white sleeves?
Just about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
I see.
In a handkerchief.
It is a well. It is a well. Yeah.
Oh, that's a well, yeah. And there, it looks like the wagon is bringing fish and the women are prepping the fish.
Oh, very good. Yes. Right next to the well, we have a wagon that's bringing fish and then a series of women who seem to be preparing the fish.
They're all
This would be a
doing
good time to mention that, I don't know if you saw in the written announcement, but if you wanted to bring like an iPad or a laptop or something, you can either Google it or download an image once we're here. But yeah, so we have in that center section, what seems like right on the cusp of the divide, in the geographic center of the painting is a well. It's a square well, so that it doesn't pop out to us immediately as a well, but we can see the chain going down into the well. Someone is drawing water there and emptying into a larger bucket of some kind. But clearly a lot of preparation is happening right in a cluster in that center section, that center right section. And if you can see closely, they're wearing headscarves and aprons. So this is a group of women, and they're gathered around the well and around a table, and they're preparing fish.
It seems
Just
like they're
did-
all doing something. Some are playing games too.
Okay, it seems like everybody's doing something. Some are playing games. Can you notice any of the games that are being played? Oh, marbles. Okay. Very good. Spinning top. In that top right section next to the brick building, there are two who are spinning tops. And they're whipping them with cords, which is apparently how you used to spin tops.
Top middle, we have a circle dance going on.
Top center.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What was that?
I just said, oh, yeah, this saw that.
There seem to be children sword fighting up near the red building on
Yeah.
the top.
Yeah. Just 1 second on Zoom. In the room, somebody noticed the archway on the right-hand side, and somebody in blue is standing out in front of the archway. We might not be sure in this moment what they're up to, but preparing something or perhaps collecting something. And go ahead on Zoom.
It looks
Okay.
like there were children up on the left-hand corner doing sword fighting with
On the
maybe toys.
left-hand side, we have children sword fighting, which we do not allow at Grace Lutheran Church, kids. Yeah. We're starting to notice some of the distinction between what's happening on the right and what's happening on the left, for sure. Anything else you wanted to mention that you noticed? Yeah. Ah. Okay. Yeah, almost anyone of any size or in any part of the foreground, almost everyone has their fronts to us. And this is how you notice artistry, because your eye is almost immediately drawn to the two figures in the center that are walking away from us.
Mhm.
It appears to be a male and a female figure. The male has his right arm around her waist or on her back, and they're sort of just walking.
Okay.
Not ropey.
To the left of the couple, with a woman laying on the ground.
Yeah, can we see in any closer detail what's happening with that person just to the left of those folks walking away from us? Yeah,
A couple of beggars.
yeah,
or
definitely
At least
crawling.
left and
And the guy at the bottom riding the barrel. Let's. Yeah, so we got the guy up on the barrel in the foreground. But just real quick, back to the person on the ground. On the left, it's a person wearing a brown overcoat of some kind. It seems to be holding two somethings. But if you can see closely, and we will take a closer look, you can see that the legs are badly bent and misshapen. This is a person who's experienced paralysis of some kind and is dragging themselves along the ground using those wooden forks. And is anyone helping them? Certainly not. The only people with their backs to us mostly also have their backs to that person. You could contrast that with scenes on the right-hand side. For example, if you look toward the right, past the woman with the white apron at the well, to her right, you can see someone attending to a person who's on the ground, who also seems to be in a bad state. Again, on the ground, sort of writhing in pain, looks emaciated if you can see closely. Then here comes someone along with their arms out to help them, to attend to them. So I'm intrigued, though, by this big guy on the barrel. And let's go to the next slide. We will get another chance to see the whole thing, but let's go to the next slide. So perhaps your eye was drawn to
On the right.
this. And this is called the Joust. And so not only do we have big guy up on the barrel, but we also find that he's got a skewer in his hand. Can you see what's on his skewer?
Chicken.
Pig, chicken, and
Who said,
Sausage.
a couple of steaks.
who said hot dogs? All right. Sausages, yes, some kind of a game hen or chicken, maybe a turkey or some other small animal, and it looks like skewered onto the head of a pig. Can we see that?
Yeah.
Traditionally, during
Oh.
Carnival, there
Yeah.
were parades probably every day, and at the head of most parades were the butcher, because the butcher is making a year's salary in just a few days during Carnival, and he's selling meat as he goes to people to indulge. Especially at this time, people are trying to pack it in before the fast. And so he's not just sort of swinging his skewer, but he's actually selling. You can also see stabbed to the front of the barrel is some kind of a ham hock. And we're not sure what's in the barrel, but the man behind him is pouring something out of it. And let's just say it's not scrupulous. I don't know what it is, but there's something tasty in that barrel. What this is really a comical joust, and it's meant to be symbolic. And so on the left, we have this large wobbling character headed vaguely in the direction of his adversary. He has a belt with knives, which again indicates that he's a butcher. But across from him, who else is participating in this joust? Can you see that figure?
It's white.
Yeah,
This kind.
fish on a long paddle.
The person in blue. And right, on Zoom, we had the comment, it's not a skewer or a spear. Instead, it's a baking platform. What are those called? The baking board.
Paddle.
And on it are not a skewered pig and hot dogs or anything else. It's 2 dried fish. Very simple. I would note that in partnership with our children's sermon for this Sunday, notice how the butcher is being pushed from behind, whereas the character that symbolizes Lent is being pulled from in front. And so this character in Lent has some kind of buffer between them and whatever is coming. But the character of Lent is so very different. Seated on a rickety chair, it's an emaciated woman. She's wearing a discarded basket as her helmet. She brandishes, a baker's shovel, there you go, with 2 dried fish. Her entourage carry pretzels, a Lenten snack made only from flour and water and twisted into the shape of arms crossed in prayer. The child is right there, right next to, yes.
Pretzels.
And we can tell here that the parade and the Lenten festival the Lenten fast have already collided. The 2 people that are pulling this figure of Lent are already colliding with a man whose nose is all beet red, and he's carrying a cask on his back. He's probably around pouring drinks for anybody who might want them. And he's sort of colliding into these figures of Lent. So there's more that we can say, but anything else you notice about the Joust?
I
The
noticed
flag.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
the flag.
The flag, yeah, and that's a good question. Red, gold, and white. I'm not sure what that symbolizes, but you can tell the difference between the faces. The faces of Carnival are all beet red and pink and flush, whereas the faces of Lent are very drawn and pale by comparison. So we could tell just by looking at their face that person holding the flag is part of the Carnival procession. And I love the intricacies of art. I mean, you have to look pretty close, but do you see how the pig is kind of nodding at the guy on the barrel? I'm not saying that's what he is, but maybe the art is. And then just opposite the pig on the other side, you have a basket of what looks like maybe either fish parts or maybe some kind of coal or ashes. So yeah, a lot to notice there.
What are the discs on the bottom of the cart on the right with a bite taken out of them?
Yeah,
Is that
unleavened
like a
bread.
communion almost? I don't know.
Yeah, I would say that's the discs on the red carpet being pulled. That unleavened bread, a very common food for those who are taking part in the Lenten fast. Nothing fancy, everything very simple, no flour added, just simple unleavened bread.
I'm fascinated by the footwear of the Lenten person.
Yeah, the footwear, very good. So the person on the right, the Lenten footwear, very simple sandals, and it looks like they're this odd sort of a shape with points on the side.
Mhm.
And then look opposite, the man sitting on the barrel at the head of the Carnival procession is, looks like he stepped in a spittoon, honestly. But
Or
hey,
slop jar.
happen. It's Carnival. We're having a good time. So I stepped in a spittoon and I can't get it off my foot. Get me up on that barrel. All right. On the left, do we see what kind of trash? Bones. And isn't it interesting how noticeable the playing cards are? I mean, that's the ace of hearts and the five of clubs. You can totally tell 500 years ago exactly what that is. We also have spilled powders of some kind and a broken cup. Yeah, they're just not being very careful. On the right, it almost looks like garbage, but I believe those are footprints behind those who are pulling the cart. Okay, for time's sake, next slide. So human actions and activities certainly follows. What we're looking at now is to the right-hand side of the painting, what's happening behind the character of Lent, seated on that rickety chair. Behind that emaciated figure, people are genuinely caring for the poor. And you can see this happening in all sorts of ways. People who are hungry are being fed, people who are, and it looks like that person on the ground is missing their feet, and that person is being attended to by someone with a basket of something or other. Nuns shuffle in procession with their Bibles and rosaries. Children keep their tops spinning, which is a harmless children's game. They keep them spinning, as you mentioned, with whips of cord. Maybe that's a reminder that a good whipping does all of us a little good sometimes. That's what's happening there. Next slide, please. Just so we have the vice of the carnival, what's happening on the left-hand side. The carnival goers eat and drink. They gamble in front of a makeshift tent. This would not be immediately clear to us, but apparently in the 16th century it was. They were putting on a play popular at the time called The Dirty Wife. Let's not go into what was all a part of that. They're engorging themselves and they're being intimate with each other. They are clearly ignoring the paralyzed person there on the ground. And instead of tops, they seem to be playing a game of throwing dishes up into the air and letting them smash on the ground. I've been told that you can see a guy holding a bagpipe leaning out of the tavern and vomiting, but I don't see it in this detail. Well, you can Google it. Okay. You can also see people are wearing these kind of grotesque sort of masks. Masquerades were really popular during Carnival because nobody could prove it was you. Okay, next slide, please. I'm just trying to keep an eye on the time as well. Now to the center of the picture. Just behind our wanderers, we have just to the side, just to the left and to the right, we have a woman on the left making small loaves of bread, maybe enough for one day. And opposite her, one of the first things we noticed, a group of women working together, taking water from a well and preparing a huge amount of fish. It's enough to last they and their families throughout the 40 days of Lent. The well in the geographic center of the piece is extremely symbolic. We know that it's symbolic in scripture. It's a meeting place. That's where Jacob and Rachel met. That's where Jesus met the woman at the well and had that very deep and important conversation. Wells are for gathering. The contrast is that the carnival lifestyle, clearly through this painting can be seen, is just pleasurable for the moment, maybe for the day, but the piety of Lent is enduring and good for the soul.
I have a question about why is the pig there eating something? It reminds me of the Sherman Herman pig that we grew up with.
Just like Sherman Herman, there's the pig hanging out at the well.
Herman lives.
Yeah, right. And I think that since it's on the left, it would be just a symbol of, and there's nothing wrong with pigs and there's nothing wrong with goats either as animals, but I think symbolically they have deep meaning. This pig is kind of routing right where the people are spending their time, and again nodding toward this caricature on the barrel, this personification, who's wearing a pie on his head, by the way. So I don't know if we caught that, but you can see he's got that pie on his head. Hard to keep a pie on your head when you're on a barrel. I'm guessing it didn't last, but so yeah, there's some significance there, some symbolism. All right, next slide, please. The buildings we would want to point out lie as anchors on the left side and the right-hand side of the pictures of the art. What it would show us are really the centers of community. We've got the tavern on the left, the center of life during Carnival. We've got the church on the right, the center of life during Lent. On the left it's not just a tavern, but it's swelling. It's filled with people. I'm looking for that guy with the bagpipe. Oh yeah, he's up in the top window there. Gross.
He's found the bit.
Reserved kegs are waiting for partygoers, and onlookers peer out of second-story windows, including one who's been having a bad day. But on the other side, the center of life is this beautiful Gothic-style church, and people are kneeling and praying. Someone, it turns out, is outside of the door in blue there, collecting alms for the poor, and ready to share what is gathered as people enter for worship with those who are in need in their community. Next slide. And in the very center, we have two pilgrims carrying what little possessions they have with them. They are clearly on the move. They are not from here. They're passing through in some way. And they're meant to represent all of us as we look into the meaning of the two sides of the life of the painting. They're led by a jester or a fool, carrying a sort of a wicker torch there, dressed up as a fool or a jester. And which way is he leading them? Toward the left, toward the carnival. Come party with us. His footsteps are decidedly toward the left, but their footsteps are decidedly toward the right. He's trying to lead them toward the easygoing life of revelry on the carnival side, but the guarded embrace that, let's just say, husband gives to his wife indicates that their destination lies elsewhere. Their gaze even seems to wander leftward toward the earthly delights and pleasures of the carnival celebration, but their footsteps are headed into the spiritual fortress of the church, where virtue is nurtured. It's the middle path taken by wanderers that we are to consider in this painting. In Bruegel's time, the grotesque excess of carnival had reached huge proportion, and I would say still today. And we are still meant to see ourselves as wanderers, as pilgrims through life's way, somewhere in the middle of the scene, balancing the earthly delights with the spiritual surety found as carnival turns to Lent. And that's the time that we're in right now. God guides our footsteps toward spiritual sanctuary and things that truly last, and abundant life that's found in discipleship and devotion during Lent. Next slide. And so the townscape is really a microcosm of life itself, and we all have choices to make. We are wandering souls making our way each day through such choices. So we're going to take about another.
Is that an hourglass?
I'm sorry?
Is that an hourglass on the back of the right pilgrim?
Oh, it sort of looks like it. I think if we zoom in closer, it's more of a bag. It's got just about everything they own probably there, or at least what they need for their travels. So we're going to take about one more minute and just simply look at, and I'm making a mental note, I don't need quite so much material for next time, that's good. We're just going to take another minute and just gaze upon the painting and see if anything else stands out to you.
His stuff under left. The pilgrim on the right. That could be a bag of sugar.
Let us pray. Oh God, we all have choices to make. Not just one big choice about whether to be faithful or not, but small daily choices. Oh God, we are wanderers, we are pilgrims. We are making our way through this life, through this world that offers so many choices. We ask, oh God, that you would guide us, guide our footsteps towards sanctuary, toward the things that last, not just for a moment or for the day, but that last and provide us true and abundant life in Christ. Oh God, as we continue to wander and journey through Lent together, help us to keep you close in mind and in heart. Help us to empty ourselves each day so that you might fill us up with true discipleship and devotion, with your love, which we can then give to the world. We ask, oh God, that we would find sanctuary here in this place and in our lives through the scriptures, through time with each other, and through pouring out your love for the world. Oh God, help us to struggle with those that struggle. Help us not always to seek to be recognized and to ascend to places of power and privilege and possession, but to descend with Christ into the brokenness of the world. In Christ's name, amen. Any final thoughts or comments tonight?
As usual, you have outdone yourself I can't wait till next Wednesday.
Awesome. Thank you. He said he'll be here next Wednesday. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I hope you'll come next week. Things will be different. Certainly the art shifts, and I'm looking forward to continuing this. So thank you all very much.